Today, the proposed trade agreement between the EU and Mercosur countries aims to foster exchanges of goods and services in all sectors, regardless of the impact on the environment and human rights. The agreement includes, for instance, provision to reduce tariffs on EU export of harmful products that have been banned from the EU market for health or environmental reasons. This includes certain banned pesticides or certain single-use plastic products or packaging. Brazil is already the second largest importer of banned pesticides manufactured in Europe, and even the largest importer of EU banned neonicotinoids. The EU-Mercosur agreement is therefore not compatible with our international commitment under the Paris Agreement and the Global Biodiversity Framework of Kunming-Montreal. If there were to be new discussion on the content of the agreement, it would be, of course, necessary to make those two international agreements essential elements of the trade deal, whose violation should trigger sanctions. But more fundamentally, the trade aspect of the agreement should be revisited in light of commitment to reduce emission and pesticide use. Indisputably, the tariff reduction on such products should be removed. Instead, the EU should commit to a plan to phase out those toxic exports. This is one example that we provide in the report to explain why the current agreement is not in line with our joint environmental commitment and why we should go back to the table of the negotiation if a trade agreement remained a priority for the two blocs.
Hi, I'm Virginia Ensler from the Fair-Trade Advocacy Office, and I will be briefly referring to Alternative 2 of Sustainability Above All. This is an alternative that looks at bilateral partnership between the EU and Mercosur countries, and that it should focus on sustainability issues without access to market. So this would mean a high level of cooperation, but a low level of market integration. Through the work in our report, we have come to the conclusion that the EU could pursue a sustainability partnership with the Mercosur region, which should put the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development at the center, and at the same time, it should be linked to relevant MEAs and ongoing initiatives such as the Paris Agreement, the CBD, the Global Biodiversity Framework, and the WTO Initiative on Fossil Fuel Subsidy Reform. This bilateral partnership could serve to highlight where additional efforts are required by both sides, such as with the tackling of deforestation or establishing a framework for the responsible sourcing of critical raw materials and a joint strategy on investment protection. On the same side, this partnership could also be used as a way to support implementation of new EU market access requirements. And these partnerships on sustainability should especially target processes that seek to avoid and mitigate the impacts embedded in EU regulation to overcome the EU's regulations limitations and to support countries in transitioning towards the achievement of the SDGs. One key point that should be present in these partnerships is the assurance that smallholder farmers and workers are able to make a decent living when supplying products to the EU markets. And there should be a central component of the achievement of sustainable partnerships with Mercosur countries. Sustainability partnership within the EU and Mercosur countries should start by jointly identifying priorities and what are the main sustainability issues, and this could particularly cover the Paris agreements, the support to smallholder farmers for climate change adaptation and mitigation, cooperation against deforestation, the phasing out of EU exports of EU banned pesticides, fossil fuel subsidy phase out, real partnerships on critical raw materials, and the strategic dialogue on investment protection.
Hi, my name is Emily Kirstens. I'm a researcher for green trade at E3G. We're an independent climate change think tank with a global outlook. Alternative 3 involves targeted cooperation and integration in the form of a bilateral partnership on sustainability with targeted market access. So it builds on Alternative 2, pursuing a sustainability partnership with the Mercosur region, but with some additional market access elements. So here, some additional aspects could involve removing barriers to environmental goods and services on a most favored nation basis, and for example, promoting voluntary eco-labeling programs. The benefit of this approach is to strengthen cooperation on sustainability by facilitating trade and investment in environmental goods and services. And this approach is in line with the model adopted by the negotiations taking place for an agreement on climate change, trade, and sustainability, which puts climate change and market liberalization on a more equal footing. In summary, Alternative 3 would seek to deepen sustainability efforts while leveraging market dynamics to drive environmental progress.
My name is Elena Blotz. I'm from the Institute for European Environmental Policy, and I'll be discussing Target 4, which is specifically targeted bilateral strategic partnerships. Now, Alternative 4 builds on Alternative 3 as it proposes a new strategic partnership framework in which both parties agree on core overarching objectives to deliver progress on sustainable development, climate action, and environmental protection. This can be achieved through a more focused and thematic approach, such as with the EU strategic partnerships on critical raw materials proposed under the EU Critical Raw Materials Act. However, what these critical raw materials strategic partnerships lack are binding commitments for sustainability. Instead, this new strategic partnership agreement would aim to prioritize responsible, sustainable, and circular practices, for example, in the space of critical raw material resource use. This would include committing the parties to uphold the highest level of environmental, social, and governance standards, rather than attempting to encompass a wide range of SDGs under one framework.
Several of our joint horizontal recommendations consist of changing the compass of strategic negotiation between the two blocs in order to build a new kind of partnership. Increasing trade flows should no longer be seen as a goal in itself. The quality of these flows matter even more. This is why parties should refrain from seeking to increase trade for all goods and services, but primarily seek to foster exchanges of goods that are produced sustainably and that are not easily available in the other bloc. In addition, any initiative for dialogue on standards should be aimed at increasing the level of protection for consumers, for workers, and for the environment, and not at facilitating trade. If upward harmonization of standards leads indirectly to facilitating trade, all the better, but this should not be a condition for it. Otherwise, there is a significant risk of seeing harmonization of rules towards the lowest common denominator. Here are, in summary, some key guidelines from our reports.
From the whole set of recommendations that we have included in our thorough report, the one that as a Fair-Trade Advocacy Office we stand by the most is the number 6 that refers to market opening provisions of more sustainable partnerships should focus on trade in sustainable products that are produced by companies that are abiding by Corporate Sustainable Due Diligence Directive and other similar laws, that are also favoring local and domestic products whenever that is possible. And this should also mean stopping the export of harmful substances that are banned in the EU, particularly thinking of the banning of pesticides.
E3G would like to highlight recommendation 3, which is that any EU-Mercosur partnership should be supported by a financial package that facilitates compliance with EU market access requirements and contributes meaningfully and sustainably to the region's clean and circular economy transition, further linking the EU's trade policy with specific programs such as the Global Gateway. This financing should not just target EU industries' immediate needs for energy carriers and raw materials, but actually address structural dependence on exporting commodities, support new clean industries, and improve the region's stake in global clean tech value chains to design a win-win partnership.
I'd like to highlight recommendation 1 and 5 from our report, specifically highlighting that the most fruitful outcome between EU and Mercosur would be a mutually beneficial partnership which delivers long-term added value for both blocs, while aiming to advance green industrialization and cementing the principles of sustainable management of the Earth's finite resources.